Ah!
Hey everyone, Dave here at Bluebears Games, and once again we are going to be doing another Blues Budget Brews. As a reminder, this is my Commander series, and this week we're going to focus on my Kangee Sky Warden Commander deck. So it's blue-white. It focuses heavily on, and the main focus for the entire deck is flying tribal, and there is another way to build it. It could be bird tribal, but for this version, as the budget brew, I'm going to be doing a just plain old flying tribal. And again, this is for sale as all of my budget decks are. So let's get into the deck and we'll go from there. I want to make one mention before I go further. You may have noticed that I have a small cough whenever I do my videos. I apologize for that. I have gone to the doctor and found out that it is something lingering from a cold I had months ago, and I just can't get rid of. Hopefully in the next coming weeks, now that I have some medicine, that will stop, and hopefully we can get through all of the videos without any of that interruption. So, with that being said, excuse me. Alright, so Kangee Sky Warden. It's 1 blue, 1 white, 3 of any. It's a 3/3 flying vigilance. Its ability is whenever it attacks, attacking creatures get with flying get +2/+0 until end of turn. That includes himself, includes everybody else that's attacking, and also when he blocks, blocking creatures with flying get +0/+2 as well. And remember, he has vigilance, so he can do both because he doesn't have to tap to attack. So let's get into the deck and we'll go from there. And then at the end, I'll show you a couple of upgrades that I have suggested for this deck. Let me zoom out here and we'll go over. So I always start with lands. Lands are simple. We're going to go into the as many blue-white duels that I can do on a budget. So Temple of Enlightenment is first. It comes into play, you scry 1. The Guild Gate for it, Azorius Guild Gate. Meandering River. Sigiri Refuge, when it comes into play, you gain a life. Tranquil Cove, also, when it comes into play, you gain a life. Lonely Sandbar, so you can cycle it away if it's later in the game and you don't need any land. Same thing with Remote Isle, it cycles for 2 instead of a blue. And Desert of the Mindful, I put the full cycle of cycle lands in here because the whole extra theme to this deck is card draw. And since we're in blue, that's pretty easy. Mystic Sanctuary, because there are a lot of spells in here, specifically card draw spells, but a couple of defensive spells as well. And you want to be able to get them back. Blighted Cataract, so that you can go ahead and sacrifice it to draw 2 cards when you don't need it anymore, if that happens. Secluded Steppe, again, it cycles. Same thing with Drifting Meadow. And Desert of the True, they are the full cycle of white cyclers. Idyllic Range, because you want to be able to buff your own creatures, so if it comes into play untapped, you can put a +1/+1 counter on one of your creatures. Most likely it'll be Kangee. If not, it'll be one of the other big fatties. Sandstone Bridge also, because it gives +1/+1 vigilance to another creature. Most likely you'll give that to something besides Kangee because of the vigilance. And of course, Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse for deck thinners. It's not really it's not really ramp so much as it is deck thinning, so that you can remove some bad land draws from your deck later. Same thing with Ash. Not same thing. Ash Barrens is also included here. This should have been in the cycling section. Again, I'm trying to get as much card draw so you can have as much fuel for the fire. Mirrored Landscape does do deck thing. It will go and get 2 lands that match. And Cape of Temptation, I put that in a lot of decks that are tribal decks, just because it puts 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature for the sacrificing of it. So it helps basically your commander get bigger. Usually it's your commander. And then I filled it out with all islands and planes. And remember, I always put the deck list link in the description section below, so you'll always be able to see what exactly is in here. As far as ramp, we don't have a lot of options. We're in blue-white. Blue-white does not do a whole lot of ramp. It does every once in a while, but I mean, some white things do ramp, but as far as on the budget, you don't have a lot of options. So I have a couple go-tos for my budget decks. Renegade Map is one of them. It goes and gets a land. It does not ramp so much as it fixes. So you put it in your hand, but it also thins your deck. Same thing with Traveler's Amulet. It doesn't come into play. There are a couple of artifacts out there that do that go and get a land and put it in play, but not many. And for budgetary reasons, I had to make the cut them. Azorius Key Rune. So there are, I believe, 3 artifacts that tap to add a blue and a white. I only chose 2 because they fit the deck better. So the key rune, it taps to add a blue or a white, but it also becomes a flying creature, specifically a bird, and it's a 2/2 at that. And the Ojutai Monument, again, taps for a blue-white, but then you can also make it a 4/4 white and blue dragon artifact creature with flying. So those 2 are in there. I did not choose, I believe I'm missing the Cluestone because it doesn't turn into a flying creature. So those are the ramp options. Again, it's not very, very good. Blue-white has a small issue with ramping. It's one of the weaknesses of Azorius. Creature time. So we're going to start off with this. Almost every, if not every creature in here should have flying or have something to do with flying. So we're going to go down the list, and you'll see why as I go, why I chose which ones I chose. Some of them are due to casting costs. I like to have a curve where you go, you ramp into higher casting cost stuff. I wanted to keep the curve as low as possible. So I don't think I have anything in here higher than 4 or 5, but I don't remember actually off the top of my head just because I made so many decks this week. So Fairy Seer, 1 to cast, 1/1 flying, and then when it enters battlefield, scry 2. Always good to have a 1/1 flyer. I've made this comment before. One of my favorite cards in Magic was Flying Men. It was simply just a 1 to cast, 1/1 from Arabian Nights. This outshines it just because, again, it's a 1 to cast, 1/1 flyer, but it also scries 2. So Spectral Sailor, one of the best 1/1 freaking casting cost. In my eyes, one of the best 1/1s in the game for 1 because it has flash and flying, and the ability to draw cards off of it. So late game, if you drop it, you can draw a card immediately. So this is great. I actually played with this in Arena. It's one of my favorite cards. Fairy Vandal, 2 to cast. It flashes in, it flies, and when you draw your second card each turn, you can put a +1/+1 counter on him, so he can get bigger as you go. And this deck has a lot of card draw in it, so it should happen a lot. Hypnotic Sprite, it's a 2 to cast, 2/1 flyer, but it also has an adventure, and the adventure is counter magic. So counter target spell with converted mana cost 3 or less. So obviously early game it's going to be really helpful. Warden of Yvon's Isle. Obviously it's in here because it makes all your creatures cost 1 less to cast. I wish there were more creatures like this. I just, they would go in here immediately. Illusory Angel. 3 to cast, 4/4 flyer, but you can only cast it if you've cast another spell this turn. You have a lot of 1 to cast spells in here or cheap stuff. Obviously with 1 to cast, 1/1 flyers, you should be able to cast this with no problem. Surrender Befreet, it's a 3 to cast, 3/4 flyer, and yeah, it does a damage to you at the beginning of your upkeep, but it's still a 3 to cast, 3/4 flyer. That you don't have any drawbacks to, like Illusory Angel. So it's always able to be cast. And it's a good big beater. Sphinx of Foresight, it's a 4 to cast, 4/4, great power toughness for converted mana cost. It also has flying, and you get to scry 1 at the beginning of your upkeep. So, also, if this is in your opening hand at the beginning of the game, on your first upkeep, you can scry 3 just for having it there. So there's no drawback to him whatsoever. Guardian of Tazim, you're playing blue-white, so obviously his landfall comes into effect here. 5 to cast, 4/5. This is one of the few cards in here that are higher casting costs, but the abilities are great. It's a 4/5 flyer, so that's already pretty good. The landfall ability is that whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you can tap a creature an opponent controls, and if that land is an island, it doesn't untap during its next untap step. So this is a little bit of control. There's not a lot of ramp in here. If there was a way to add green, it would be even better. I just don't there is no possible way to do that with the way that this deck runs. That's still pretty good, though. Archetype of Imagination. Now, again, this is a higher casting cost. This is 6. I wanted to curve into it, but you'll see how it will curve easier when we get into the white and the multicolor stuff. This is in here because this is your game ender. So all your creatures gain flying. They already had it. Doesn't really matter. It's the second part where creatures your opponents control lose flying and cannot gain flying. That means that you will always have the advantage as far as your creatures being able to fly in and kill your opponent. Sphinx of the Magosi, 6 to cast. It's a 6/6 flyer. You draw a card and then put a +1/+1 counter on it for every 3 you put into it. So again, drawing a card, secondary theme for this deck, and then putting a +1/+1 counter on him makes him bigger. He will be also a game ender if needed. Stormtide Leviathan. This is where things get really interesting. This is your lock. It's 8 to cast. It's an 8/8. It has Island Walk. It's the one thing that doesn't have flying, but it doesn't need it because of the other thing. All lands are also islands in addition to their other types that include your opponents. So yours count as islands. Your opponents count as islands. Even if they are your planes, they will be dual lands at that point. And then creatures without flying or island walk, which everything in here has flying, except for this, it has island walk. Now that that's in there, they can't attack you. So it's defensive and offensive at the same time. Onto the white creatures, Loyal Pegasus. It's the one that casts 2/1. It just can't attack or block alone, and you should be able to have something else attacking or blocking with him out. So power toughness for 1 and flying, always good. Healer's Hawk. It's the one that casts 1/1 flying lifelink. Obviously, it's in there to, it's a 1-drop. It's got flying, just like the deck needs, and it also helps you gain life. Skaven Angel, another 1-drop. It's got flying and vigilance. Obviously, you can see why it's in here. Kangee's Lieutenant, it had to go in here just for the fact that it also says Kangee on it. It's 30 cast 1/1 flyer. When it attacks attacking creatures with flying, get +1/+1 until end of turn, and it has Encore. So for each opponent that you have, if you Encore it, you're going to have 4 of them out. Well, 3 technically, because you're going to have 3 opponents. Usually, it depends on how many opponents you're going to have, but in a pot of 4, you would have 3. So then all your creatures would get +3/+3. That is basically the white equivalent, and I'm going to say this, but it's not really because you don't gain trample, but it's the white equivalent to overruns effects. Emancipation Angel, it's a 3 to cast 3/3 with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you can return a permanent, return a permanent you control to its owner's hand. That's good for things that have ETB or enter the battlefield effects. So when you can put it in your hand and put it back in play, and then you can reuse the enter the battlefield effect. You can use it as a, say somebody imprisoned in some way, like with another white enchant or something that makes it so that your commander can't do anything and just sits on the field. You can remove it from field, bring it to your hand and recast it so that it takes it out of jail. Spirit of the Spires. 4 to cast for a 2/4, it's flying. Other creatures you control with flying get +0/+1. It helps with defense. And remember, Kangee has vigilance, and when it blocks, it gives +0/+2 to things, so it would be a bonus of +0/+3, making your blocking even more effective. Archon of Absolution. It's a 4 to cast 3/2, flying, of course. Has protection from white. Not really that relevant because nobody really plays white. But it says creatures can't attack you or a planeswalker you control unless their controller pays 1 for each of those creatures. Does that sound familiar? Ghostly Prison or, Propaganda do the same thing. I think Propaganda is 2. It might be 1. What is it here? I don't remember what it is. Either way, it's the same effect, so it makes it so your defense is higher. Celestial Crusader, it's a 4 to cast. It's a 2/2 with flash. A couple of things in there have flash. That's not really that relevant, but it's nice and helpful for defensive purposes. Split second, so whenever you cast it, nothing else can be cast, and this has to resolve before anything else can. And of course, it has flying, and then other white creatures you control get +1/+1. Remember, Kangee is white as well as blue, so you're going to get that bonus for Kangee. Emiria Angel is a 4 to cast 3/3 flyer with landfall. The landfall is whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control. You can create a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. So creating tokens that fly also buffs up everything. Safara Sky's Blade. I do not count this creature as a 7 to cast, but it is. It's a 7 to cast 7/7 flying lifelinker, and other creatures you control with flying have indestructible. You can see why it's in here. The reason why I don't consider it a 7 to cast creature is because in this deck, you're probably going to pay the 1 white and tap 4 untouched creatures you control with flying so that you can get it out there a lot faster. Judge's Familiar, we're going to go into the multicolor part of the deck as far as creatures. Judge's Familiar, it's 1 to cast 1/1 flying, and then you can sacrifice it to counter target instant or sorcery unless its controller pays 1. In some instances, that will be very big. Somebody tries to wipe the whole board by putting all of their mana into an X spell to wipe the board, and you can just make them pay 1 or it's countered. Skycat Sovereign, 2 to cast 1/1 flyer. It gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying. You can see where that's going. And it also does something even better. For a blue, a white, and 2, you can create a 1/1 white cat bird flying creature with token, or with flying. a creature, a 1/1 white cat bird creature token with flying. So think about that for a second. A white cat bird. I don't know where they came up with these creature types, but whatever. But it creates a 1/1, and it gets bigger when you do that. Watcher of the Spheres. So 2 to cast, 2/2. Creature spells with flying cost 1 less to cast. Remember I said I wish they made more? I meant more than the ones that are in here because I've got all of them in here. This one makes everything 1 less to cast that has flying, so that's really good for this deck, especially when some of the things are a little higher to cast. Whenever another creature with flying enters the battlefield under your control, Watcher of the Spheres gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So the fact that you made things cheaper to cast means that this, whenever... Alright, let me explain it a little better. Skycat Sovereign, you can put things into play. If you have enough mana, you can keep putting things in. This will get bigger as well. So, Jubilant Skybonder is one of the better cards in the deck overall. So it's hybrid 3, so that means it's either 2 blue, 2 white, or a white and a blue in 1. That's how hybrid works. If you need to understand hybrid mana even further, send me a message. I'll explain it even further. It's a 2/2 flyer for 3. And then creatures you control with flying have... Basically, it's Ward 2. So spells your opponents cast that target this creature cost 2 more to cast. That has been turned into Ward. So it helps protect your creatures. Sky Spirit is a 3 to cast, 2/2 flying for a striker. Tempest Drake, again, old. It's a 3 to cast, 2/2 that has vigilance. That's what this means. So it doesn't tap to attack. Empyrean Eagle. This is one of your anthems. It's 3 to cast, 2/3. Flying, and other creatures you control flying get +1/+1. Here's the other anthem in here. And anthem, again, is giving creatures of a specific type +1/+1. Thunderclap Wyvern, 4 to cast, 2/3 that has flash. Flying, and other creatures you control flying get +1/+1. So there's 2 anthems right off the bat. Sphinx of the New Prov. It is a 4 to cast, so 2 white and 2 blue. 4/3 flying vigilance, and then spells your opponents cast that target Sphinx of the New Prov have Ward 2 or cost 2 more to cast. And the last creature is Dream Trawler. It is 2 blue, 2 white, and 2. It's a 3/5 flying and lifelinker, so there's more lifelinking there. Whenever you draw a card, and this deck does draw cards, Dream Trawler gets +1/+0 until end of turn. When he attacks, you draw a card, and you can discard a card, and Dream Trawler will gain hexproof until end of turn, and then you tap it for doing so. So if you're already attacking, it doesn't matter, because he'll tap. Unless you can, there are ways to give vigilance in white, obviously. So that ability is just to save it. So those are the creatures I've chosen for the budget build. Again, I will give some upgrade options later. As far as spells go, I'm going to go into a couple sections. We're going to do some card draw, we're going to do some token creation spells, and then we're going to do some counter magic, and then some defensive stuff. So we're going to go with the card draw. So blues, bread and butter, opt. Scry 1, draw a card. It's a cantrip. Slip Through Space. It does 2 things. It doesn't happen to be blue. It costs blue to cast, but it's not blue. It makes a creature unblockable, and you draw a card. Anticipate. It lets you draw, or I'm sorry, this isn't a card draw technically. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, and then you put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. Chart a Course. Obviously, you're going to be attacking a lot, so you draw 2 cards and discard a card unless you attack with the creature. Obviously, you're going to be attacking and then play it. Winged Words, it ends up being, in this deck, a 2 to cast to draw 2 cards. Obviously a no-brainer. Dream Cache, it's 3 to cast to draw 3 cards, then put 2 of those cards both on top of your library or on the bottom of your library. So you can choose to put them wherever you want. Chemist's Insight, draw 2 cards, and then you can jumpstart it so you can cast it again. And it's 4 to cast to get 2 cards at instant speed. That's always a bonus. Hieroglyphic Illumination, again, another 4 to cast instant that lets you draw 2 cards, but you can also cycle it to just discard it and draw a card. So no matter what you do with it, you'll be able to draw cards. Azorius Charm, you get to choose the following. You can give a creature lifelink until end of turn. You can draw a card, which is what I would do with this, unless it depends on the situation you're in, or you can put an attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. That includes your opposing players' commanders, and then they have to choose, do they want to put it on their library or do they want to put it in the command zone. Sphinx's Insight, so it's 4 to cast. You draw 2 cards at instant speed, but with Addendum, if you cast it during your main phase, you also gain 2 life. Verity Circle, this one's a little cheeky. It's a 3 to cast enchantment. Whenever a creature an opponent controls becomes tapped, and it isn't being declared as an attacker, you may draw a card. May. You don't have to. You may. Most likely you will. Where that's important is especially if you're playing against a green opponent who uses elves and likes to tap them for mana, you get to draw a card for their privilege of them doing that. You can also pay a hefty price of 5 to tap a creature without flying. The hope is that you're playing against people who are using tap abilities that are mana abilities or other abilities that aren't attacking with them, so you can draw for free. And then Reconnaissance Mission. This one's actually just... There are a couple of versions of this. I think Coastal Piracy is another version of exactly this card with one small change. So whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card. That can equal a lot of cards really quickly in a deck like this. It's a tribal deck based on just attacking. Blue usually doesn't have something like this, so that's a bonus to have this. But it also can be cycled away if for some reason you don't want to put it out. Alright, so that's the draw side of the spell section here. Got a couple of other cards in here. These are token creators. So Talrand's Invocation, it creates 2/2 blue Drake creature tokens with flying. Battle Screech, I had this in there because it has a flashback, and the flashback is essentially free. So for 4, you create 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying. Then the flashback is to tap 3 untapped white creatures you control. So it pays for most of itself just for being what it does, which is creating 2 of them. You just need a third one, and you can create another one, and then you can create 2 more, so you'll get 4 actual bird tokens out of this for 4 mana. And Migratory Route. So it's 1 blue, 1 white, and 3 of any. It has basic land cycling, and what that means is that you can pay 2, discard, and search your library for a basic land card, and reveal it and put it in your hand, or you can play it and create 4 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying. So in all, you can create 2, and then another 4, so that's 6, and then another 4, so that's 10. 10 token creation just in those 3 cards. So... And you could take them out with some of the suggestions I have for the upgrades, but that's the first things I would cut, would be those. Some very small section of counter magic because we're in blue, and you still want to be able to counter some things, especially game enders from your opponent. 2 to cast for Lofty Denial. It counters as a spell unless its controller pays 1, but if you control a creature with flying, you can counter that spell unless its controller pays 4. So it ends up becoming better than Mana Leak. Negate obviously just counters a non-creature spell, basically game enders. Essence Scatter can counter a commander if need be, or any other creature that could be nasty. Remove Soul, same thing, it counters a creature spell as well. And Neutralize also counters a spell, but you can cycle it away in case you need something else, or you want to draw a card. So, simple counter magic. It wasn't a lot. You can change it up to be that if you want it to be a more control style. You can go ahead and put more counter magic in. You can take some out. You can put more card draw in. There's a lot of directions you can go in the deck like this. Defensively, I went with stuff like this. Frogify. This is for commanders specifically. The enchanted creature loses all abilities and becomes a blue frog with a base power and toughness 1/1. So that means most people's commanders, unless they have a way to stack it, they're rendered useless. That works really well on things such as Perforos or indestructible ones, because not only can they not be destroyed, they have to sack them to get rid of this off of them, or if they have enchantment removal. So there is that too. Aetherize, it returns all attacking creatures to their owner's hand. Revoke Existence, exile is an artifact or enchantment. Exile is important in this case because you don't want graveyard recursion. Dismantling Blow has a kicker in it. So for 3, you can destroy an artifact or enchantment, but if the spell was kicked, you also get to draw 2 cards. Pacifism, like same thing as Frogify, it just makes their commanders sit there if it doesn't have an activated ability. Suppression Bond, same thing. You can enchant a non-land permanent, so you can the enchanted permanent can't attack or block, or activated abilities can't be used. So this definitely goes on to a commander, because then if it has an activated ability, it's useless. And Law Mage's Binding, so it's 3 to cast, it has flash, a lot of things have flash in here. Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and its activated abilities again can't be used. So, more for commander stuff. It's commander defense. And the last part of it is only a couple cards. We're going with Anthems. This is your bread and butter as far as when you're attacking, you want your creatures to be bigger. So favorable winds makes all your creatures with flying get +1/+1. Obviously, that was an auto include. And then Glorious Anthem because it gives all your creatures +1/+1. So that's the deck in a nutshell. If you have any questions about it, go ahead and send me a message and I can explain everything to you. It's pretty straightforward. It's a bird tribal, it's a flying tribal deck, and I'll explain why I said bird tribal in a minute. But it's a flying tribal deck, and it actually isn't too bad. I did test it out. It's pretty quick, actually. If you get the right hand, you're pretty much attacking, drawing cards, getting more fuel, and people just can't keep up with that. All right, as far as the upgrades go for this kind of a deck, I'm going to rifle through these a little bit. I've changed up how I show you the upgrades. I'm only going to show you a couple of the upgrades in picture form, but I will mention them. So if you need to go back and research what the cards are, for the most part, the ones I've selected to show you should be ones that would be a little bit less familiar to you, and the ones I tell you should be a lot more familiar. And if that's not the case, let me know, and I'll see if I can change it back. So for lands, we're going to do all of the dual lands that we didn't see, which would be the more expensive ones. So that would be a Tundra. Obviously, that's in the hundreds. That taps for a blue-white. It can be searched for with anything that searches for an island or plains. Then you have Hallowed Fountain, which is the shock land, and a Glacial Fortress, which is the, what do they call that? The check land, because it checks to see whether or not you have a basic, or any, if you have a plains or an island, and it comes into play untapped if you do. Edakar Waste, which is the Pains land. The Pathway, which is Henge Gate/Mistgate Pathway. And then Mystic Gate, which is the filter land. So those are the dual lands that I would add in here. There may be a couple more. I mean, there's one that was reprinted in Iconic Masters that you could use. There's a couple that you could use. Other things that I would do. Moorland Haunt. So what that does is it makes you so that you exile a creature card from your graveyard and you can create a 1/1 bird token. Not bad. Emeria the Sky Ruin, a little bit opposite effect. So for that one, if you have 7 planes in play, you can return a creature from your graveyard and put it into play. Not bad. And then Karakas. Karakas can be used offensively or defensively. Offensively, you can use it to return your opponent's commander back to their hand so that they don't have whatever the ability is on it or whatever defensively it is. Offensively, that's how it works. But defensively, you can return your own to your hand so you don't have to pay commander tax later or just because you want to save it from dying or exiling or what have you. Fairy Conclave is one of the old lands from Urza's Legacy. It actually turns into a flying 2/1 creature. Reliquary Tower, because you're drawing a lot of cards, it makes it so that your hand doesn't matter. Hand size doesn't matter at all with that. And War Room to help for more card draw if you need it. If you were thinking of doing something, I mentioned this earlier in the video. You can go full bird tribal if you want. You can eliminate all the other stuff in here and just go full bird tribal. That's what some people do with a Kangee deck. So with that, you would go with Seaside Haven. That's definitely bird-centric. Animal Sanctuary, because I believe it gives a +1/+1 counter to a bird or this or that. Doesn't really matter. All you care about is bird for that. There are birds in here, too. Your actual commander is a bird, so Animal Sanctuary would work with either way. And then Cavern of Souls, because if you go bird tribal, you can name bird, and then those spells can't be countered. For ramp, I have a few staples I like to use in ramp, and I think everybody does. So you got Soul Ring, Arcane Signets, and Thought Vessels, especially in a deck that draws a lot of cards. Thought Vessels is pretty good. Jeweled Lotus is the new hotness because it'll put your commander into play a lot faster. It pays for 3 of whatever you have in there. Mana Crypt, obviously, because it's 0 to cast and adds 2 mana to your mana pool, and then you can cast things quicker. And Mox Diamond, because it's a free Mox that taps for any color. You just have to, I believe, discard a land card. I believe that's what it is. I'll have it up. No, I won't have that one up here. I'll actually, if you need to know what it does, I always suggest this to people. MTG Familiar or The Gatherer, you can look up any card. Then there's the cheaper side of these things, because those are all, in the more expensive range. Not so much like Soul Rings are now getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, but Talisman of Progress is the 2-drop that taps to add a blue or white, but it does damage to you. Mind Stones are always good because it's 2-drop. And Felwar Stones are also a 2-drop. The only thing about the Felwar Stone in a deck like this is you're playing blue and white, and not a lot of people play white, so you're probably going to tap it for blue. Let's see, what else? We've got creatures. Again, I mentioned changing it to bird tribal, so look up in the Gatherer or on MTG Familiar. Any bird you want to swap out, and you can just go full bird tribal. But if you don't do that, you can do something like a Sarah Ascendant, really cheap. I think it's 2 to cast, and it's a 4/4 or something like that. No. I'm sorry. Sarah Ascendant's a 1 drop, 1 to cast, 1/1. That if your life total is higher than a certain point, I think it's 25. It's like a 5/5 with vigilance and like lifelink. The one I was thinking of was something else. You can do a Bygone Bishop. That's a pretty helpful thing in a deck like this. And then Baneslayer Angel is a 5 to cast. I think 5/5 Vigilant, Trample, Lifelink, and Protection from like red and black. So that's one of those cheaper things that you can put in here to help make some of the other things shine better. All right. And let's see. There's just hundreds of creatures you can choose from. Remember, it's flying, so there's just a lot. As far as the spells for the upgrades, Wrath of God effects, you're in white, so you've got Wrath of Gods and all of those white spells that do different ways of killing all the creatures on the board. You've got your choices of them. You've got counter magic, so counter spell and mana drain and force of will and force in the. I mean, you've just got counter magic galore. So if you want to go that route and do control style, you can do all those. And then Cyclonic Rift and all those things that return everything to their owner's hands, you could use them as well. For card draw, you've got better card draw out there. Obviously, there's brainstorms and stuff like that. There are a lot of ways that blue likes to draw cards, and there are a lot. And you actually, people I've learned have a very distinct way that they like their things to be done. For instance, card draw. I have a lot of cantrips I like just because I'm just trying to cycle through my deck. Some people don't like that. They like to have the things where they cost 3, but they draw 2 cards because it's not a cantrip. So you can choose how you want to do that as well. Defensively, we're in white, so you have things that do a lot of things like disenchants do. So there's a lot of cards that remove. They exile enchantments or artifacts. I mean, white is the king of just removal of all kinds. So you've got that. Including that is things like Swords of Plowshares. Creature removal for exiling is great, especially when it comes to Commander, because in Commander, you seriously want to just not give people the ability to recur from their graveyard. There's a lot of graveyard recursion that goes on in Commander. You want to exile things. Enchants. This is where white and blue can actually shine a little bit more than others. For actual getting land, white does it better than a lot in one aspect. Land tax. Land tax itself lets you go and get up to, I think it's 3 lands if you don't have as many as another player. You're also, if any player on the board is playing green, you're going to be behind. So land tax is great. You have defensive effects like propaganda. And I mentioned earlier, white's Ghostly Prison. They make it so you can't be attacked. Great defense. More card draw, you have things like Ristic Study. I know it's a pain in the ass. Do you pay the 1? Do you pay the 1? I get it. It's just still one of the best card draws in all of Magic for Commander. On top of that, you also have things like Mystic Remora that do essentially the same thing, but that'll go away just because it has a creature token creation. You've got Court of Grace. So it also gives you the ability to get more card draw by making you the, what is it called? The Monarch. So you become the Monarch, and now you're creating 4/4 Angel tokens. You have other Anthem effects, like Always Watching. I already put in here a Glorious Anthem, but Always Watching in a deck like this makes it all your non-token creatures gain +1/+1 and Vigilance. I mentioned that before. Then you have other things that ramp you a little bit in white, such as Smothering Tithe and Monologue Tax. So there are some similar ways. I understand that white's one of the weaker colors in Commander. You can make it stronger. You just got to do it the right way. Artifacts. Artifacts for protecting your commander, like Swiftfoot Boots or Lightning Greaves, are always good options. Some Anthem effects that can be done through artifacts are like Spear of Heliod. It's an artifact, not an enchantment. It gives all your creatures +1/+1, and I think it actually destroys a creature that did damage to you, so it's defensive as well. You've got the Immortal Sun. The Immortal Sun is an artifact Anthem effect. It gives all your creatures +1/+1. It makes it so planeswalkers can't be used. It makes you draw an extra card. It's actually an overall great card. So that's an option to do. And then Sword of the Animus is actually one of my favorite cards. I wish I had more for myself. I don't even have one. It lets you go grab lands. And any color can use it because it's an artifact. So it's a great addition to almost any commander deck. I want to do a side note for the bird tribal with artifacts though. When you do just a pure tribal build, not like I mean a tribal, not a flying tribal, but like a bird tribal, your options actually open up a little bit more on the artifact anthem effect side because there are a lot more cards to choose from because they say choose a creature type and those creatures get +1/+1. I have to disclude them from this deck because not everything in here is one actual tribe so much as it's a bunch of a bunch of different creature types that do the same thing. So it's a little tricky on that one. And the last section that I have is Planeswalkers. As far as Planeswalker go, there's not a lot that can help this deck really too much. If you want to continue the theme of Flying Tribal, Sarah the Benevolent is one because it creates angels. Mu Yanling, the Sky Dancer, I believe creates illusions. They are flying as well. And then Tezzeret, the Artifice Master, creates Thopter tokens, which, by the way, are my favorite flying creature types. I actually made a deck a while ago that I sold for $20. That was literally called Death by Thopter because everything revolved around rotating in a lot of Thopters. It's actually one of the cooler cards in Magic. In my opinion, it's one of the cooler creature types. I love the way that they work. So those are just a couple of the Planeswalker options. Not a whole lot there. I'm not a big fan of Planeswalkers in a deck like this. So anyway, that is a deck that's Kangee, the Sky Warden. Those are the upgrades for him. If you have any questions or concerns about anything I talked about, please go ahead and message me. You can do so in many ways, and I'll explain that in a minute. Remember that this deck is for sale. This is part of my Blues Budget Brews and my Blues Budget Battle Brews section. I sell them on the Facebook page. You can go to that page, and you will see the advertisement I have. I sticky noted the Commander section, so it's the first thing you should see when you go there. And all Commander decks are $40. They are also discounted $5 a piece for multiple purchases of the Commander decks. Same thing with the Blues Budget Battle Brews. They are the 60-card beginner decks. Well, not really beginner, but newer player decks that if you don't like to build decks. So go there, take a look at what I got, and go from there. And if you want something, send me a message and talk to me. So how do you do that? Simple. You can go to the Facebook page. It's Blue Bears Games Online on Facebook. You can send me an email. It's bluebearsgames@gmail.com. Or you can put a comment in the section below and tell me how to contact you, and I will go ahead and do so. So that is my time for this week. I want to thank you for watching. I want to remind you to please subscribe to the channel. It doesn't cost you anything. I don't do a whole lot of videos, so I'm not gonna flood your feed with a lot of stuff. It would be really helpful to me. I'm trying to get to 500 just on this one. Remember, I do have a 500 subscription contest going on. Once I get to 500, somebody will get a free deck. So remember that. Like the video. It helps my analytics. It would be greatly appreciated. All right? It's not going to cost you anything. Again, it takes a second, if that. You can do it while watching the video. What else do we have here? Share the video out. If you know somebody who may be interested in either building a deck like this or purchasing a deck like this, share it out to them. Or just share it in general. I won't be mad. I'd actually love you for it. All right? And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, maybe even, some suggestions on stuff you want to see, go ahead and let me know. I'm more than happy to talk to somebody. I have all the time in the world. I mean, I'm busy, but I have time to talk to people when I have the time, when I'm free. And it's a lot of times I'm free. I'm just doing something that I have to just take a pause and do. So until next week, I hope everybody has a good one. You stay safe and enjoy that week. And I will see you all next week.